Like I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. So we decided to sell. Well, we sold at the absolute peak of insanity post-COVID. And we sold it for 1.32 million. Now, at the time, I was very happy to take that money and go invest. And I bought real estate, did other things. We live in a rental house now. That's awesome. Okay. Now, today, in this little neighborhood we live in now, we have this house for sale, one street over, 200 square feet, less than half an acre lot, fenced in backyard. That's about the only thing you can say about it. $789,000.
Yeah.
What is these people are insane.
Hey, welcome to Networking Star. This is the podcast where I talk to some of the most interesting and innovative entrepreneurs out there. I'm your host, Jeffery Boyle, and I am super excited to be joined by the real Jason Duncan. He is a best-selling author. He's a TEDx speaker. He has a podcast. He's the founder of the Exeter Club, and he's on a mission to help over 100,000 entrepreneurs find success and balance. Jason, great to have you here.
It's an honor to be here, man. Thank you.
Now, you're out of Nashville, Tennessee, and I've gone through a lot of the different things. We met on Instagram, and you're taking a pretty bold stance on a couple of things, really going after a stalwart of the industry with Dave Ramsey. And there's no better way, I guess, to bring attention to what you're doing than take on a guy that is pretty cemented in. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so as a matter of fact, that the newsletter I was just telling you about that I had to get my assistant to check while I'm doing this show. The newsletter is all about this event that I'm doing next week.
Yeah.
That we've titled "Why Dave Ramsey is Wrong About Whole Life Insurance," and that's really, to be honest, that's just the hook to get people to look at it. But the reality is, I do believe that he's wrong about that for a certain segment of the population. You know, his audience is stay-at-home moms. It's W-2 employees, it's corporate employees, solopreneurs, and his advice about getting out of debt, cut up your credit cards, eat beans and rice. Like, I get it. I lived that way for most of my adult life. But when I became an entrepreneur and then became a millionaire as a result of entrepreneurship, I looked at that advice going, wait a minute, there's something missing here, because I started noticing that the wealthy people around me were doing not the opposite, but we're doing things very differently than the way Dave taught. And I was a faithful Dave Ramsey listener. I read his books. As a matter of fact, I went through Financial Peace University back when he was teaching it live and in person. It's how long ago. And so I thought, well, how is he wrong? And then I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm like, holy crap, this is a whole new world. And so it opened me up. So about 5 years ago, I started looking at whole life insurance as a wealth building and a wealth protection tool. And the only thing I'm sad about is that I didn't start it 20 years ago, because I would be sitting on literally millions of dollars in cash value that I could use to finance, a car, finance a new business, finance real estate, finance anything I want without having to go work with stupid banks. But anyway, so that's our event is next week. I've got my certified financial professional who's also a bank on yourself professional. He's flying in from Chicago. We're doing a 2-hour deep dive into whole life, how you use it, how you build it, how you structure it. So that's what's coming up.
Well, I've got whole also. I've also got term. This kind of thing. If I die, I'm probably worth quite a bit. So my wife's told me that I'm worth more than my insurance, which is nice. But I guess she has to say that after 25 years, right? But no, I agree with you. It's kind of thing that when I first listened to him, there's so much good that he does. And this, Americans and now are finding the Europeans are just so crazy unprepared, and just how easy it is to get in trouble. So there's a lot that he does right, but I think you're right. His message is definitely targeted at perhaps the lower, this will sound bad, the lower worth, at the financial worth type of audience.
Well, people with a much lower net worth that'll never be millionaires. They might be millionaires through 401k or an IRA at some point when they're 65 and a half, but they're not building generational wealth now. And certainly that's not there's nothing wrong with that. That's just different. It's a different way of looking at it. And, his organization, I'm speculating here based on people that I know because he's in Nashville and I know people that he knows. I think his organization is doing like 300 million a year.
Wow.
And he has no debt. He has no debt. From all accounts looking out from the outside looking in, he follows his own advice. I thought for years that there's no way he did, but now that I'm closer to some of the people that know him and know him pretty well, it's like, yeah, he follows his own advice. He doesn't have debt. He doesn't have whole life insurance, but he's an anomaly for someone to be able to create a $300 million annual empire based on this don't borrow money, cut up your credit card things. Because every billionaire, every super wealthy person is using debt strategically. They're not paying cash for buildings. They're not paying cash for airplanes. They're using debt strategically. So I believe in that methodology of using debt strategically to get what you want. As a matter of fact, true story, I'll tell this, you listeners might find this interesting. I've had the same used car for 5 years. I bought it used. I drove it for 5 years. I love cars, but I have to restrain myself or I would go buy very expensive cars and it would be nuts. It would be dumb because I don't need to spend the money, nor do I have the place to park them right now. But anyhow, I finally decided 3 weeks ago, all right, it's time. So I love my car, but it's time. It's time to get a different one. My wife's like, no, we're not getting a new car. We don't. And she's being practical based on the old Dave Ramsey. Hey, we don't need to borrow money. Well, first of all, I've got whole life insurance. So I can go get money. But what I'm thinking of, and was actually what I'm doing, is I've got a friend who runs a high-end car rental company through Turo. And so I'm going to go buy 2 vehicles to put in the fleet. I'm going to not lease them. I'm going to borrow money, bank financed money, both those vehicles, put them in his fleet. I'm going to clear probably $1,100 a month. Clear to me, like after he takes his cut, after insurance, after the payments, I'm going to clear about $1,100 a month. And that's going to allow me to go borrow bank money to buy the car that I want and have those 2 cars pay the payment. And so I'll have 3 cars when I could have just bought one and had a payment. I'm going to have 3 and have no payments.
Well, and I think that, it takes discipline to do what you're talking about. And I think that, if we can, the last Dave Ramsey statement on there, what he's doing is he's really helping the undisciplined get some discipline. But strategic debt and the ability to use other people's money to be able to really increase your income, it requires some know-how and it requires some expertise. So I think that's really cool what you're doing with your events, is that you're helping people understand how to use debt properly.
Yeah, well, there is a proper way to use it and there's an improper way to use it. It is about discipline. But I don't know a single super wealthy person or even a semi-wealthy person who doesn't have strategic debt. I don't know one. And I know a lot. And I don't know one I don't know a debt-free multimillionaire. Well, I just don't. They might exist. I just don't know those people.
As an example, one of the biggest mistakes I made when I was really starting to earn money is I started paying off massive amounts of debt. And I look back on it, and it was shortly after 2008. That is when real estate was the cheapest it's ever been, and we'll never see it that way in the next near future, right? And instead of because I had law school debt, I had previous business debt, and law school debt, when you're paying off loans from, through the government, FAFSA and things like that, it's very low interest rate. And I could have used the $100,000 that I put as it just wipe out that thing. I could have put that as a down payment on probably 3 places in Las Vegas that since 2008 have skyrocketed in value. And so I think that's kind of the example. And I've listened to so much of his stuff as well, that those are the type of things when I was making a significant income at the time, that, it was just to have that badge of honor of saying that I was debt free when I really could have created wealth with that same money.
Yeah. Well, we all get there, man, but it is about discipline. You got to do this right. Because if you just if you're a person that's earning, less than $100,000 a year, or even low 6 figures, and you take some of this advice that some of these Instagram gurus are talking about, how to use strategic debt, and even the whole life insurance thing that we're talking about, and you do that wrong, you're going to be in a worse position.
No question.
So you've got to be very, very disciplined to make sure that you're doing it right. But and the prices of real estate, man, come on. What the heck is going on right now? I don't know what it's like in Vegas where you are, but like here in Nashville, it's stupid. The greed is insane. I'll give you an example. So 5 years ago, we bought a house, and I know every market's different, so these numbers aren't going to make sense because somebody's in a market that's like, well, that's a cheap house. When in 2018, we bought a small farm, 8 acres, fully fenced, cross fenced, barn, well, pool, a pond, a creek, like at a 4,600 square foot house, a big, nice estate home, very nice. $775,000 we paid for it. Okay, that at the time very expensive, but the right value for that type of house, and it had been on the market for 6 months. Like nobody touched it. It had gone down and down and down, and we bought it, and we loved it. And at the time, we thought this is our dream house. We're never going to move anywhere else. We thought it was fantastic. But in 2022. We made the decision. It's like we travel too much now. This is a lot to upkeep. Every time the wind blows, a tree falls on a fence, I have to go cut it. Like I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. So we decided to sell. Well, we sold at the absolute peak of insanity post-COVID, and we sold it for $1.32 million. So we made 74% on our house. So it appreciated 74% in 4 years. Now, at the time, I was very happy to take that money and go invest, and I bought real estate, did other things. We live in a rental house now, but I thought that's awesome. Okay, now today in this little neighborhood we live in now, we live in a nice neighborhood, but we live in a rental house. We're probably one of 3 rental houses in a neighborhood of 100 homes. It's a nice little neighborhood. This house for sale, one street over, is only 3,200 square feet. Less than half an acre lot, fenced in backyard. That's about the only thing you can say about it. $789,000.
Yeah.
What is these people are insane. Like that house is never going to be worth $789,000. And the listing agent is the owner, or the owner is the listing agent. I'm thinking, what people need to settle the hell down. This is crazy. We think that we're capturing something that's going to help us. We're actually just hurting people.
You're essentially describing it. So I moved from Las Vegas to Idaho, where I'm from, and we bought 5.5 acres, and we had a private pond on there. It was a giant home. It was my dream home, but we bought it, and 4 years later, we more than doubled what we purchased it for. Yeah. And if I were to try to buy the same home now, it's almost impossible to find it for anything close to $3 million. So the point is, real estate is still right now, when's the peak, when's the valley going to come? And I think that's always the difficulty in knowing from it. And it's the same thing with the businesses. A lot of the content that you put on there is knowing how to exit properly. That's the same thing with real estate. I exited actually almost exact same time as you. Bought a place in Costa Rica, lived in Costa Rica, and then sold it at a bit of the peak. And we're doing exactly what you're saying is we're renting right now because it seems crazy to try to pay for it when you know that there's going to be 7% interest. There's going to start to be some real problems with people because the homes you're buying at 7% interest is pretty hard. Talk a little bit about your business, that what you're doing and exiting, but not completely exiting. And I'm sure it's exiting at the right time. And talk a little bit about that.
So most entrepreneurs build businesses, start businesses with the intent of having a better life, having more control, more free time, and more money. That I would be hard pressed to find an entrepreneur who would disagree with that as one of the motivating factors for starting a business.
No question, it's freedom. Yeah. Work when you want, when you want, where you want, and with who you want is a big dream.
But the irony, what I call the ironic prison of entrepreneurship, is that you end up working longer hours. Sure, you might make more money. Some people don't, but might make more money, but you're working longer hours. You have more stress, and you're stuck because your business relies 100% upon you and your presence to get things done. I'll give you an example. I had a guy on my podcast a few years ago, and he was running a very successful 8-figure blue collar business.
Wow.
So it was in the blue collar field. I won't say what it was, but it was, and he was in Texas, and he was doing like 8 figures into this blue collar. That's a lot of money in what he was doing.
It's a lot
And
of
he
money.
hired a
Just
consultant.
about anything. 8 figures is a good.
Yeah,
bid.
8 figures is good. Listen, no matter what you're doing, 8 figures is good. So he invited he hired a consultant to come in and like analyze the business, what could he be doing. And the consultant, after 7 days on site, came back and said, "Here's my recommendation. You should shut the business down and go get a job as a CPA."
Oh boy.
And the owner actually had his accounting degree. And so the consultant knew that. And the owner was looking at him and said, "What?" He goes, "Here's the deal. You're stressed. You work 80 hours a week and you're bringing home," I can't remember what he said, but it was probably 220,000. Maybe it wasn't that much. Maybe it was like 150. He said, whatever it was you're bringing home, you could make that much money as an employee working 40 hours a week for somebody else with no stress. You could go home every night and not worry about it. And the owner, my guest who's on the show, he looked at it, he's like, okay. And he didn't take the guy's advice, but he took the message. And so he went and retooled his business to where it didn't do all those things to him. He took home more money, started making, he didn't tell me what he's making, but I would imagine he's making 7 figures.
Yeah.
But he started taking home more money appropriate to what he was bringing in revenue. He started working less hours, and the business started to scale. Entrepreneurs who don't have outside perspective usually can't accomplish that. Well, actually, almost never accomplish that. And so in 2020, I stepped away from the daily operations of a very successful multi-million-dollar company with a 7-figure bottom line because I was the center of the business and couldn't sell it. So I thought, well, how do I get out of the weeds? So I got out of the weeds and let my team run it, and they were able to run it. I continue to maintain ownership, tax advantages, financial benefits, et cetera. I really didn't know what I was going to do next. And people started asking me, and they're like, "Jason, how did you do that? What did you do?" And I said, "Well, I exited without exiting." And because people were saying, "Didn't you exit?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I still own it." "Well, I thought you exited." "Well, I exited without exiting." And so many people want to know how I did it. I started a coaching company, started writing, started doing content around this, and then ultimately ended up writing the book, Exit Without Exiting, on it. I speak around the country on the concept. I talk about it on podcasts. I talk about it on social media, and I'm helping thousands of other entrepreneurs figure out how to get out of the weeds of daily operation, get back to the enjoyment of their business, still grow a business, but not have to be in the weeds.
Well, and I think that's the issue is, can you scale it and make it so you're not the focal point? Because if you're the focal point and it's all about you, you're never going to be able to sell it. And and if you're going to have to do it, I have a good friend of mine that I had on the podcast. His name is Mike Sheffield, and Mike's been doing his business for probably 40 years. And I asked him, when are you going to step aside? When are you going to stop? And he said, probably when I'm 6 feet under. And so there's definitely guys like that just love what they're doing, but he's also surrounded by a team that, that supports him and helps him to do what he's doing. But he loved it. He's made great money, but he also loves what he's doing. But there's also a lot of us that, in different businesses and different times are exactly what you're talking about, which is you make it revolve all around you. How do you help a person make it not all about them, that they're the gravity and everything is rotating around them?
Well, this is a mindset issue, and this starts with someone having to acknowledge the problems. Like alcoholism cannot be overcome until you recognize and acknowledge that you are an alcoholic. Yeah. So until the person recognizes that from a mindset perspective that they're pretending to be the hero of their business and they're making the business totally reliant upon them, there's no amount of tactics that I can teach you or coach you in that's going to help you get out of that. So I've got to help people with their mindset. And that mindset is really a very selfish mindset. Uh-huh. So think about this. If you're running let's say running a $7 million company and you got 15 or 20 employees, and you've built a business that revolves around you. You're the focal point, as you said, which is very common, happens all the time. Yeah. And you go home one day and don't come back the next. Something happens. You're either dead or you get hurt and you're in the hospital for 30 days or longer, and you don't come back. What happens to those 15 employees?
Yeah, most likely
they're out of a job.
Yeah,
they're out of a job. They're in trouble. So your insistence upon being the number one dude the best person in the business does everything. Your insistence upon that is jeopardizing the lives of perhaps 60 other people, because if you get those 15 employees, you're married, two kids each, that's 60 people because you want to be the hero of your business. Come on. Listen, you didn't start the business to endanger 60 people. You started the business to provide yourself a better life, and hopefully everybody that works for you a better life too. So this starts with that realization. And so my mission to help these 100,000 entrepreneurs get success and balance is so that families can get their dads back. You know, the wives can get their husbands back. You know, they can start being more present, and that these employees finally get job security. Because the biggest, one of the biggest lies we're told in the employment marketplace is, well, if you get a job, you got good job security. No, you can get fired any moment. That business can close down tomorrow. Ask the people who've gone through those big layoffs. That it happens. It's more dangerous to be an employee than an entrepreneur, but we think it's the other way around.
Well, and it is more it's not stable in any stretch of the imagination anymore. You look at it, something that's even happened recently. Bud Light was the number one beer, I think, in the whole United States, and now they're laying people off because of one bad decision from, it's a pretty bad decision, but a bad decision by an employee to completely offend their consumer base. And so you see corporate America executives making terrible decisions in one of the most stable environments imaginable, and they're doing layoffs. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, it's a pretty different world than what even our parents grew up in. My oldest son is 23, and I've got 4 following him. It's a completely different world, and if we don't teach our kids these entrepreneurial principles and the ability to pivot, the ability to change, artificial intelligence is going to put all kinds of businesses out of business, or you're going to have the people that really know how to take advantage of it that are going to be able to thrive during this time. How do you, once you've got a guy or gal that is admitted that it's all revolving around them, what do you do then from that point to be able to start to put in the steps so they can have the freedom and so the business can actually scale?
Well, there's four things past the mindset, which of course we have to acknowledge is the first thing. But once we get past the mindset, now it's 4 very specific tactical things that I teach. There's 4 pillars to this exit without exiting concept. The first of which is embrace delegation.
Okay.
And delegation is misunderstood by 99.9% of the public. They think it's just assigning a task to someone else, but it's so much more than that. It's assigning and trusting and empowering someone to do that task, and there's a lot of nuance to that. So that's first step, is you have to truly embrace delegation and get yourself out of the habit of doing everything. The second pillar of this is to eliminate stress. Stress is a killer, like physically and otherwise. I mean, it's a financial killer, it's a momentum killer, it's a sex killer. I mean, stress can kill anything and everything, and it kills a lot of businesses because employees and entrepreneurs alike running around with chickens with their head cut off, hair's on fire, whatever analogy you want to use. You have to eliminate that, or the next step won't matter. The next step is establish systems and processes. And see, most business coaches, most gurus will tell you, it's about systems and processes, then you get out of the business. No, because if you do systems and processes without first embracing delegation and eliminating stress, then you have a system and process that relies on you, and everybody doing it is stressed out all the time. So that's not going to work. But the third pillar is systems and processes, specifically a good sales system, a good sales process. And then the fourth pillar is about investing in people, about making sure that you truly invest in people, because they're going to be the ones that run the company in your absence. And then that leads us back to the first pillar, embrace delegation. So it's just a cycle. So those are the 4 things that I did to get out of the weeds of a very successful business without it crumbling. And that's what I teach my clients to do.
It's I've been running for so long. Sometimes it takes one of those tough moments to really kind of, bring you back. It doesn't matter if it's trouble with the child, trouble with who knows what, your health, but sometimes people are forced into it. The best thing is to be able to wake up before any of that happens, right? And I can tell you as an entrepreneur, sometimes you really do think that the world revolves around you with your business. But I like what you said there very much. It's not just delegate, but to empower. Inspire, empower is a much better way than just giving somebody a task. It's really exciting what you're doing. It's gosh, I sometimes call myself a fanatical entrepreneur, a kid that's been, I've been selling since I was a kid at 8 years old, the fundraisers and then the lawn mowing businesses. And then you look at it and all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, I'm middle-aged. How did that happen? And then now you've got kids that are doing the same. It's a wonderful message that you're giving to be able to help guys to actually enjoy some of the life. I'll let you have the last comment of this is, how do you start your career? Stephen Covey would always say, start with the end in mind. How do you start your career as an entrepreneur with the expectation that you're going to have freedom and then structure your day around that?
Well, I think it's the same 4 pillars. When you start, rather than creating the negative thing you have to climb out of, start with the end in mind. Okay, at the end of the day, a year or 2 from now, I want this company producing X number of dollars in revenue, X number of dollars in bottom line profit, and I only want to be able to have to put in X number of hours per week in order for that to happen. And I would say you can do that in 10 hours a week or less. I think if you're doing it right, you should be able to run a successful multi-million-dollar business in under 10 hours a week if you do it correctly. Now, you can't do that day one, but if that's your end in mind, if that's the end you're going for, first thing is get your mindset right. You can't be the hero of the business. You've got to hire correctly. You got to make sure that you got the right people on board. You got to have systems. You're delegating correctly. Your stress is eliminated. All the same 4 things I would teach anybody. The difference is you're not having to dig out of a bad habit. You're creating the proper habits to start with. And if you work that system correctly, you can start a business, and within a year, you can have a profitable, scalable business that is pushing off a very good income for you as the owner without you having to be the operator. And if you do it right, you can do it well from the get-go.
It is the way to start. I can tell you, I think it was the bucket list when Jack Nicklaus talked about how fast time goes through. I think his was a fart in the wind, if I remember properly the way he said it. But it's weird to think of how fast time can go and how much time you can waste without that proper setup. So, the real Jason Duncan, tell everybody where they can find you. And I see on your Linktree, you've got your TEDx talk, you've got your book, you've got your seminars. Tell everybody where to find you.
So follow me on Instagram at The Real Jason Duncan, The Real Jason Duncan. If you're a LinkedIn person, also it's at The Real Jason Duncan, and on YouTube at The Real Jason Duncan. Anywhere, you just Google The Real Jason Duncan, you're going to find me. And my TED Talk just dropped this week, my second TED Talk. It's called Don't Say Divorce. So everybody go to YouTube, just look up Don't Say Divorce and go to my TED Talk and leave a thumbs up and a good comment. I would appreciate that.
Well, I'm going to do that. I told my wife that there's no way I could start over. I don't know how somebody could train me, how much she's trained me to understand her over the last 25 years. And you talk about a financial killer, that divorce can be a rough one. But
yes,
look forward to watching that. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, man.